Welcome to the Why Coaching Works podcast. My name is Monte Wyatt, and I'm here to take you on a journey into the world of coaching, exploring its many different facets and uncovering its profound impact on individuals, businesses, and executives alike. We'll be delving into real-life case studies combined with in-depth research from coaching experts to give you a better understanding of why coaching works today. So if you're ready to begin your exploration into the power of coaching, then let's get started. Before we get into this month's episode, here's a short message from Adding Zero's Executive Development. As CEO, you demand performance and results from your team. If you're committed to developing a cohesive, driven organization that achieves successful outcomes every single month, we need to talk. It's time to see how organizational and executive development from Adding Zeros can help. We focus on strategic planning, executive coaching, team alignment and engagement, organizational culture, and clarity of implementation. Contact Monte Wyatt by booking an appointment at www.addZerosNow.com. That's ADDZEROSNOW.com, AddZerosNow.com. If you're ready, now is the time. I have a few coaching spots available for 2025. Lock in your team today. Now let's begin today's episode. Welcome to the Why Coaching Works podcast, where we talk about the impact of coaching, growth of businesses, and personal development. I'm your host, Monte Wyatt. If you're a CEO, a business owner, executive, then this is the show for you. We call our audience the achiever because you're always striving for the next level. It is my pleasure and honor to have another executive coach join me on Why Coaching Works today. And Ken Gosnell specializes in helping leaders and business owners have breakthrough experiences. He does this through strategy sessions and leadership retreats. Ken's why is to help faith-driven CEOs hear the words, "well done," as they live their lives and leave a legacy of success. Ken, welcome to Why Coaching Works.
Thank you, Monty, for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's always fun to interact with other coaches and get their perspective. The different perspectives really help people learn what coaching is all about and get the impact that they need when they're expecting coaching and getting the coaching. So I appreciate you joining us as well. So just to tell us a little story, start us off by how did you get into coaching? Tell us your journey to get into coaching.
Well, actually, I started coaching executives when I worked with the Dale Carnegie organization many years ago. I read his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and then went and took the Dale Carnegie course and was just so felt like it was just a natural component of who I was and what I wanted to be about. So I became a master trainer for the Dale Carnegie organization, and through that process, then started coaching executives and CEOs to help them build their businesses.
That's fantastic. How long did you work with Dale Carnegie?
It was several. It's been a many years ago now, but it was several years that I was with them. So great organization, largest coaching organization in the world, still today. And of course, Dale Carnegie wrote his book back in 1939, and it's still a phenomenal bestseller all around the world. So it provided me an opportunity to work with executives and coach CEOs and business owners. But it kind of was the start of my journey that I recognized we've had a lot of focus on, obviously, business coaching and sales training and personal development, but that a lot of times that still didn't necessarily lead to success. It might mean that they built a great business, but didn't necessarily mean that they were very successful in their own personal life or even in their spiritual life. And so that's where that individual coaching started to really take hold for me. I appreciated mentors and was mentored along the way by many great leaders, and very fortunate to have that in my life. But I recognized that there was a need for leaders to not only learn how to live well in their business, but also in their personal and spiritual life. And so that led me to launch my own business about 20 years ago called CEO Experience, where we work with executives now, helping them to grow their business, but also their personal life and their spiritual life so that they can hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
Oh, that's awesome. Tell us a little bit more about the phrase "well done" and where that comes in and how you came up with that.
Well, there's a story in the Bible that talks about it's a business story about a guy that goes on a long trip and he has three employees. And so he gives some resources to each of the employees. And he says, hey, use these resources while I'm gone. And two of the employees do really well and one doesn't do so well. But when the leader returns, he says, how did you do? And the first guy, he doubled all the resources that he was given. And the master says, or the leader says, well done, good and faithful servant. And so for me, that passage just really meant a lot. That story meant a lot. And it really kind of epitomized what I was striving to do in my life, that I wanted to hear well done in all the things that I had done in business, but also I wanted to hear words well done from my wife, and I wanted to hear the words well done from my children. And of course, ultimately, I want to hear the words well done from my Savior. And so that passage was I was on a mission. What does that really look like in my life? What does well done look like? And when I started to talk to other leaders and CEOs, that phrase really resonated with them as well. And what we recognized and what I recognized was that you can be well done in one area of your life, but the rest of your life can be kind of a mess. And it's not good enough to hear well done in one area of your life if you can't hear well done in all areas of your life. And I know that seems like it's a big accomplishment, but really, I believe that's kind of how we're called to live our lives, that we're to be successful not only in business, but also in our personal life. And that's why I really wanted to go into coaching and help other people be successful in their entire life, not just one area of it.
I love that, and I appreciate you sharing that story because that it is about success in every area of life.
Yeah.
Because if we're not doing well at home, we're going to show that at work. If we're not
Okay.
doing well at work, it's going to show it at home. And so that's a great point to make. Success is about all areas of your life. I love that.
Well, I had one of the guys that I was working with years ago that I was working with just on the business side. And, he was very aggressive about building his business. And he said, hey, Ken, I want to grow this business and then I want to sell it. And I'm going to have this beautiful, result. And of course, that's what he'd hired me to do, was to come in and help build this business. And we did. We grew the business and he had a great business, great product, great service, great people. But through that process, I recognized that he was sacrificing his home life and he was sacrificing his spiritual life. And so I warned him and I said, hey, I love you. I care for you. I want you to help to be successful. But I see that you're really succeeding over here, but you're not succeeding at home. And he said, Ken, don't worry about it. I've got it all under control. My wife is supportive of everything that we're doing. And so for the next several months, I just kept warning him. I threw up the red flag and just kept trying to communicate to him. But he hadn't really opened up that opportunity for me to totally step into that life and to help him in that area. But I'll never forget, about a year and a half later, he calls me at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And of course, I answer the phone because I don't know if it's an emergency situation or what the deal was. And this is before he had all the knowing who it was. And I answer the phone, and he's on the other end, and he's just crying. He's sobbing. And I said, "What's the matter? Are you okay?" And he said, "No." He said, "I came home tonight, and my wife and my three kids are gone, and she had moved everything out of the house. He came home to an empty house."
Mm.
And he didn't see it coming. He just totally was caught off guard. And he had been sitting in that empty house crying for a couple hours, he told me. And that was really a defining moment for me because it really um, resonated with the fact that, I can help people build a great business, but if I don't help them to build a great life, I'm not hearing the words, well done. And so now, part of our coaching is that we start with where it's most critical for them, whether it's business, personal, or spiritual. But we ultimately want to cover all those areas because we recognize how essential all of them are for success, even personal health and development.
That's fantastic. I love the story and appreciate you sharing that because there's probably a lot of our audience that are in a similar scenario that they don't have that good balance of success in every area of their life, and sometimes we're blind to it. And that's a big part of our role as executive coaches is to help people see their blind spots, but they have to be willing to see them, and they have to be willing to address them. And so that's a great example. Just for fun, I always ask this question because I hear different perspectives. How would you define the word coaching? What's coaching mean to you, and how do you describe coaching?
Yeah, I think I like the term coaching is a great term. I love the word coach because coach to me means make you better, right? That I'm going to come along and I'm going to see things that you can't see or challenge you to think about things that maybe you haven't thought about or hold you accountable to that area that you know you need to be accountable, maybe that you don't want to be accountable to. But I like the word partnership, right? That we're really a partner with our whoever we're coaching, that we're entering into an agreement, a relationship with them, and that we're partnering together for a period of time as we walk through life in order to achieve certain breakthroughs or certain defining moments that they hope to achieve in their life. So I like the word partnership. That's how I describe and define coaching.
I love that, and I like saying that partnership as well because it is you got to have equal ownership.
Right.
And we can only go so far. And the person that we're coaching has to take ownership of their actions as well.
That's correct.
And so it is a partnership. It's a give and take on both sides, giving new insights, and you have to be willing to accept them.
That's correct. Yep. I use the word covenant too. I don't talk about contracts. I work as a covenant relationship with whoever I'm coaching. And the covenant means that there's your part and there's my part to it. And there's certain things that I'm going to deliver when we meet together in our partnership meetings or our retreats, however you want to describe it, our coaching, executive coaching moments. I'm going to bring something to the table, but I'm also asking you to bring something to the table. And so it really is that covenant type of relationship that we have with one another where we can speak freely and openly. That I challenge the CEOs that I work with and I tell them that I'm going to ask them questions or say things to them that nobody else would say to them. Right? Because I want them to know that we're in that deep of a relationship that nothing is off the table. Obviously, we have total confidentiality and that agreement as well. But that's all part of that partnership, right? It's really the two operating as one in order to bring about that desired result.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You shared one story earlier, and I'd love to have you share another story or two about the impact that you've had on folks. And, you know, let's talk about two different areas. Maybe one area is the person as an individual, but then also talk about the business because we do impact both sides, the personal side and the business side. So start with an example of impacting someone on the personal side.
Well, I just had one of my favorite probably moments of coaching just happened actually this past week. So every year I bring all of my coaching clients together for what I call a 2 day advance. And not everybody comes, but I invite everybody to be a part of it. So we might have 40 or 50 or 60 CEOs or business owners in a room together, and we spend 2 days strategizing and thinking about vision. And there's some usually a theme that we're working on. And so this year, I had our team together, and I asked them to start the day by going out. We were up on a 12th floor of a conference area and is overlooking this beautiful lake down in Central Florida, and I asked them to start the day with a moment of silence and a prayer. And so we did. And then the group responded and said, "Hey Ken, you give so much to us. Can we pour back into you for a few minutes?" And part of a coach, we always want to make it about the other person. We're always considering the other person more important than we're considering ourselves. We're partners with them, but we're really other centric, other focused. And so I don't necessarily, I share a lot of personal things because we're in that partnership together, but it's always to benefit or help the other person. But I love it when we have relationships with our customers or our clients or our partners. And anyway, they spent probably 35, 40 minutes just talking out on that balcony and just telling me how much I've contributed to their family and I've contributed to their business. And it was just one of those moments that, you probably work your whole life or I've worked my whole life to make an influence or an impact on somebody else, and to have them just spend a few minutes. And so anyway, one of the teams that was there was a father and two of his sons, and I'm coaching the father and the two sons, and it's a great story because I coached the father for probably 15 years now, and about 5 or 6 years ago, his son was wanting to start a business. And so I invited him into some of our coaching sessions, and I just for free, just so he could see his father and the way I interact with his father, right? And help him to think about business and understand that. But anyway, his two sons were there, and now I'm coaching his sons, and they have businesses and that they're trying to grow that. So, just to be able to see the impact that you have when you're investing in somebody else and helping them to become a better version of themselves. And then to hear that, you see it, but then to hear it sometimes is just it was really a highlight for me that just happened a week ago.
I love it. That's a great story. Great story. And it's very impactful when others tell us how we've changed them, and we see it. And we see it in their lives, we see it in their personal aspect and their business aspect. And so that's great. I appreciate you sharing that generational story. Um, yeah, how about another example of how you've impacted organizations? And you talk about impacting individuals. Let's talk about impacting the bigger picture, the whole organization.
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the things you get into coaching for is because you recognize the power of the influence that you have on that person, and then that person having on their organization or on their team. And so it's always exciting to see when you have breakthroughs. So a lot of times, for example, I mean, we've seen businesses that have grown exponentially. They've ended up selling and fulfilling their dream that way. But a lot of the tools that I've developed, as an example, the CEOs and business owners, they use that as they coach their teams, or they might bring me in to coach a particular team. And it's just wonderful to see the culture change that takes place when there's that growth of learning. I say there's three different types of learning, and learning, I use a triangle, if you will, and I do the middle of the triangle. Level one learning is when we learn by ourselves. Level two learning is when we learn with a coach, and we have somebody that's partnering with us to help us to see further, see more than we can see on our own. And level three at the top of that pyramid is when we learn with a team. And so part of what we should do as coaches, I believe, is we're really going into that culture so that we're changing how the team communicates, we're changing how the team looks at the business, we're changing how the team operates together in relationship with one another. And the what they hear in our coaching sessions really should permeate in and throughout the organization. And so obviously probably the best result is when you see a company that has been struggling for a while, and that you begin to work and help them to grow and develop. And then, they have maybe a cell where they've built it up in such a way that they've completed their vision and goal, and they want to hand it off to the next generation or the next potential leader. And they look back and they see a lot of the way that you contributed to the organization to get it to that peak, so that they can hand it off. And I'm very honored when I hear stories, or I see my tools, or see resources that we've given that's really begin to change the dynamic and the culture of an organization.
Absolutely. The culture is such an important thing, and I view it this way: the leaders of a business are the ceiling of the business.
Correct.
And if they're not living out the culture that they desire, or they're not fulfilling and holding others accountable to that culture, it isn't going to happen. It isn't going to grow. It isn't going to improve. And so that leader has to be the driver of the culture, the driver of the change. So that's fantastic. That's fantastic. As a coach, I'm sure you've been coached as well. Tell us a little bit about the impact of coaching, of being coached by yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had great mentors and coaches in my life, and this really turned me onto that. One of the ones that I talk about in the book is my father, who was never desired to be a coach, never thought he was a coach, and yet the stories that he told me and the lessons that he taught obviously uh, uh, has transformed my life a great deal. But other guys along the way, that guys like Pat Williams, who just recently passed away, was a great mentor and friend to me as I wanted to launch out into the coaching business. Uh, I was able to call him and ask him certain questions, and or even like Chris Widner or John Gordon. When I wrote my book and asked for them to endorse it, they were able to do that. But just the wisdom that they were so gracious to impart other things to me as I went through different issues. Because sometimes when we're coaching, it's easy to get in isolation. And so it's important to make sure that you have a team around you that, when you get stuck or there's a particular issue that you're not so sure about, that you have a resource or a group that you can call out to and ask, hey, have you dealt with this, or how did you deal with that? Or maybe even one of those difficult days, right? It's tough when you lose clients that you've worked with for a long time, or you're just having a bad time of it. It's nice to be able to call in somebody to give you a word of encouragement or a word of support. And so I love the network of coaches that are out there that I've been able to plug into through the years, and the generosity that they've been able to give to me just because I asked. And I said, hey, and it's kind of awkward to ask sometimes. And sometimes it might be just a once a year type of thing. Sometimes it might be a couple times. Sometimes it's just a text message or a phone call. But yet, if you're in the coaching industry, you really want to find other coaches to run with you, because
Mhm.
that team can really make the difference in your life.
That's a there's a characteristic, and I call it the mindset of abundance. That's a
Mhm.
characteristic that we as coaches have to have, not only for ourselves, but to instill with our clients. And we got two executive coaches right here talking about the coaching world. There's plenty of fish out in the sea. There's plenty of business. There's for all of us, and it is about learning from each other and challenging each other and helping each other. And I think that's a big, powerful message of for our audience, the achiever is whether it's another business owner or whether it's your coach or multiple coaches, you want that outside perspective because we can't see everything. And that's what the whole relationship of coaching and having others participate as well. You mentioned your book a couple times. Tell us a little bit about the book. Well done.
Well, one of my favorite proverbs is where there are many advisors, there's much success, right? And so having those teams around us. The book Well Done really was an opportunity for me to think about what are those key, I call them business biblical principles that can really make a difference in our life, but that transform just not only our business, but also our personal life and our spiritual life as well. And these are principles that I know work. They've worked for a couple thousand years. They're going to work for a couple thousand years after this. And so I wanted to outline those principles that would really help any CEO or business owner get better in every aspect of their life. And so these principles are designed around, getting better at them, but never mastering them. So things like knowing your yeses and nos. There's a statement in the Bible that says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And a lot of times I find in our life that we don't know our yeses and nos. And our no's sometimes become unclear. And so we say, well, I don't really think I'll do that, or I don't think I should do that. But we're not so definitive that we say, no, I'm not going to do that. And that clarity really empowers us as leaders to say, here's the boundaries that we're setting for our business or for our personal life or our spiritual life. Things like improve your team to improve your organization. Every great leader, I don't care how great you are, you need a team around you to be effective, which we've been talking about, a team of coaches. Jesus is a good example of that. He was the only leader that could have ever let alone, right? He could have done anything that he wanted to do. And yet, the very first thing that he did was he went out and found a team, 12 disciples that he could spend 3 years with. He could train them and develop them so that he could pass on the legacy to them that they could go on and do great things after he left. So, these principles are so powerful for us. I've begun to realize those. And so, what I ended up doing when I wrote the book was I wanted to see these principles that transform leaders, not only in this generation, but in past generations as well. So I ended up studying business books back 150 years, all the way back into the 1800s before the Industrial Revolution. And I read every book that I could find that was written by successful business leaders at the time, mostly guys that had a spiritual faith or that were successful in their personal life as well as their business life. So guys like P.T. Barnum, he wrote a book back in the 1960s, or excuse me, 1860s called 40 Years of Struggles and Triumphs. Or Henry Ford, who wrote a book, his autobiography in the early 1900s. Or J.C. Penney, who wrote his autobiography in the 1950s. And I found that there were certain principles that kept repeating in each one of these leaders that it may have acted a little different in their business, but the principle that they mastered stayed the same. And so then I began to really use that with our business leaders as well and say, hey, here's these principles that can really help you to hear well done in your business, but also your personal and spiritual life as well. And so that's what the book is about, those 12 biblical business principles.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to add that to my book list, my Tower of Guilt, because I got a Tower of Guilt, books that you want to read and you haven't gotten to yet, but I'm gonna add that one. So I love that. I want to reinforce a couple things for our audience, the achiever, and especially it's about learning. And you said it, learning on your own, learning with a coach, learning with a team, and that reading is a big part of it.
Correct.
And you mentioned autobiographies. Study history, study people that have built businesses, and that is a great and powerful way to learn new skills and to see what worked and what didn't, because that's what they've gone through, and that's what they share in those autobiographies. So to my audience, the achiever, make sure that you're always reading something, but the autobiographies are a great one to do. I just finished reading Elon Musk. Have you read his yet?
I have, yes.
Yeah, it's just very interesting to hear how he thinks and how he makes decisions and
Mhm.
interacts with folks.
Yep.
And it's powerful to read those books.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Actually, I've had people tell me because I quote over 200 business books in my book. So if you go through the autobiography, and they're mostly written by CEOs and business owners. So like I was mentioning before, but one of the principles I talk about is believe in asking the impossible. And Elon Musk is a great example of that, right? He's asking the question right now is how do we get to Mars, right? Or how do we have a rocket that comes back and lands just like it took off, right? And he's asking these big questions that everybody else would say would be impossible, yet he believes it's possible. And one of the things I coach, I tell my clients, I say everybody can do the impossible when somebody believes it's possible. And I'm that person for the CEO a lot of times. I'm seeing something in them, or I can see what they can do, maybe even before they can do it. But then back to that culture piece, it's their job to go to their team and to be able to see in their team or their organization, here's what I believe is possible, even if everybody else tells us it's an impossibility.
I want to reinforce that. Say we can do the impossible when someone believes it's possible.
That's right.
That's a very powerful statement. Thank you for sharing that. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit and hearing your story, hearing your tips as a coach, things like that. If there was one suggestion or a tip of someone considering being coached, what would you tell them?
I think the biggest thing is to have a level of uh, openness and humility and to recognize that they may be at a really high performing level, but if they're open to going to an even another level, the ability to expand and to grow only is limited by our attitude a lot of times. And so no matter how great I'm performing, I can probably perform just a little bit better. That's something I learned years ago at the Dale Carnegie organization. They used to talk about the what they called the iceberg effect.
Mhm.
And the iceberg effect is that when you go to see an iceberg in the water, you only see about 3% of the iceberg. The 97% of it's below the water. And if you can improve yourself just by a little bit, just think about that for just a moment. If you could improve yourself, if we're only performing at 3% of our ability, and we move that from 3 to 4% or 3 to 5%, if I'm a little bit more effective in my work at home, or I'm a little bit more effective as a parent, if I'm a little bit more directive as a leader, if I'm a little bit more organized in my time, if I'm a little bit better, just a little bit better, how much more effective and more can I accomplish? But to me, it always starts with a level of openness and humility. Can I listen to somebody else? Can I learn from somebody else? Can I listen a little bit better to what's going on around me, and to realize no matter how much I've accomplished, there's somebody else that can see a little bit more. They can challenge me a little bit deeper. And so that openness and humility, I believe, is really a critical part that helps us to grow as leaders.
Absolutely. I love that you shared that because if we're not open to it, we've got that I know mentality
Mhm.
and we're not going to change, we're not going to grow. So you have to be open. So I love that. Very good. You know, if one of our audience wants to get connected with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
I'm out there on the internet. I write for Forbes and Entrepreneur, but they can find me on LinkedIn. Just look up my name, Ken Gosnell, or CEO Experience. Either way to do that. If they want to send me a direct email, they can send it at my first and last name, Ken Gosnell at ceoexperience.com. ceoexperience.com, which is the name of my company.
Very good. Very good. Ken, I really appreciate your time and sharing your insights. Again, just a couple things I want our audience, the achiever, to remember. Coaching is a partnership. Coaching is developing a deep relationship to talk about many things, not just business, but you have to have that success in every aspect of life, your entire life. And so I really want to reinforce that because it's about growth in every area, not just one. So I want to encourage our audience to keep that in mind is what parts of your life needs to grow, what part of your life needs to improve and get better and better so the rest of your life can improve as well. So I want to thank our audience for joining us today and remember to like and subscribe to our podcast. And if you want help with coaching, reach out and we'll gladly help you. Take care. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Why Coaching Works podcast. I hope this episode has helped you see the individual, business, and executive impact, growth, and development that coaching provides. Please take a second to give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Each review helps me impact more people just like you and make a difference in this world. See you on the next episode of Why Coaching Works.